Decided to work. You know why?
Good afternoon, partners. Thank you so much for waiting. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty here, not our fault, but some software problems. Anyways, welcome to the new show. It's called The Panel, and basically we're here to really talk about and really focus in on sales ideas, strategies, and really concepts from the masters of sales or selling. Each week we're going to have a lot of different special guests, that either come from, our industry, outside of the industry, and they're going to help us understand sales just by itself and how to sell more, how to achieve more, how to get more opportunities, how to get more leads. And we're just absolutely thrilled to have our special panel today in studio. We're very, very lucky. So as you know, my name is Crancer, and I'm the Senior Partner Channel Development Manager here at West Coast for the Western region. I'd like to introduce the panel. Justin, do you mind introducing yourself? And then we can go to Eugene and then to Ro.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Justin Slagle. I'm the Partner Channel Development Manager for the Southwest area of the U.S. Look forward to joining you guys and having a discussion about sales today.
Hi, good afternoon, partners. Eugene Chi, the GM of the West region for S&B.
Hi, I'm Ro Kolakowski, CEO of Security Consulting.
All right, thank you, Ro. Appreciate it. We're really lucky to have them because I think that with the experiences, between the three of them, is going to be, paramount to helping partners understand how to improve their sales processes. So the agenda today is we're going to go into our thought leadership. We have a couple updates that we want to talk to you real quick, and then we've broken it up into three different acts. Our first act is really going to be about the elevator pitch. We all talk about it, we all think about it, but and sometimes a lot of us don't think it's really important. So, and then it actually is. Next, we're going to talk about prepping for a meeting, some of the things that you need to do before you get there. And then Act 3 is really about prepping an opening statement, which is different than the elevator pitch. It's really how do you set up your meeting. We'll wrap it up and have our summary, and then we'll have a call to action, and then we'll go from there. So let's look at the updates really quick. One of the most important things we have is our insider call. I want to make sure that you go ahead and register for this. If you haven't registered, it's super important. It's really, really to get the pulse on the latest stuff that's coming out. And we have Eugene actually heads it up once a month. Next, we actually have a new board, a new place to sign in for everything, which is awesome. Finally, we have something that I can share with the partners, and it's a follows board, but it's very simple to access. It's aka.ms/PLG. Very simple, aka.ms/PLG. Make sure you get there and then sign up as an MCC partner. And the reason why I'm saying this is that we have a new metric that came in, and it's a rolling 12. So if you haven't done an event recently or not, you've fallen off, okay, of the potential partner list. And it's really important to show, that we are engaging with, all the great partners that are on this call to make sure that you're registered. So do that. And then lastly, take the Project Lead Gen course, and that is accessible through this. That's going to really help you.
Just to clarify, Sherman, on the monthly partner call, that's the first Friday of each month.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, first Friday of every month, and it'll be 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. All right, perfect. Thank you. So let's get into the thought leadership portion of this. I basically want to talk a little bit about, the saying, live by the sword and die by the sword. So a lot of us, there's a lot of different partners that are probably on the call today that range from either sales executives to technical executives. And really, what's interesting is that a lot of people think, oh, the salespeople, they have it great. They're prima donnas. They come in whenever they want. They're showing up at 10:30. and they come up with this big deal and everyone's, giving them accolades. Well, I'd like to let you know that, sales, while there is some benefits and some awesome things about it, and yes, you can make some great commissions and money, you're really just as good as your last month. So it's very interesting. It's different than having a job where, the quota isn't there and then that every month you have a job. In sales, there's high reward, but there's also a bit of risk. So, with that, we need to understand, sales concepts and preparing. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult to winning deals. I mean, you have to look at sales and not just give it an afterthought. You have to, provide the time, your own time, and actually learn your craft. It's a very important part of your business. If you're just an IT pro who has, 10, 20, 30 accounts, and you're like, well, I need to learn, I need to bring in 5 or 6 more. Well, you really need to work on your craft, and that's how to actually sell. A lot of us talk about salespeople are often very, very lucky, and then all they do is just sit back and take orders. We'll get into that a little bit later. But preparation really is the key to everything. I learned a long time ago from one of my great managers that scripting really is everything. And it was to the point where it was so tedious. We literally had every word that we were going to say so that we would know what they were going to say, and then we would already be prepared with a great rebuttal, right? So preparation is the key to every opportunity. Now, potential, I want to bring this up really quick. Potential really is just that. I as a VP of sales, and I was managing 36 reps one year, and a lot of reps would come in and they had a lot of potential. Man, they looked good, they interviewed well, they talked a great game, but the matter that you had that would basically signify that they're a great salesperson, it was really dependent on their hard work. So you can have all the potential in the world to be the best salesperson ever, or the best closer, or the best person to take opportunities and actually run with them. But if you don't work hard, really it's your potential is really just that. So the last thing I'll leave you with is you really want to ensure that you're taking this part of your practice very seriously. This isn't something that can just be held off on the side. Maybe I'll work on it, maybe I won't. You should dedicate certain amount of time every single month to work on your craft, as well as making sure that you're doing sales and marketing. We'll leave you with the last thing. Remember, leaders do what they talk about, and dreamers talk about what they're going to do. All right, so let's get into the panel. All right, you don't want to talk, listen to me very much anymore. Let's talk to the panel. All right, so the first opinion really is, and then I'm going to bring this to the panel here, is, and I've seen this a lot, or heard this a lot. It's like, well, Sherman, the sales acumen of the channel that you're in isn't very high. They're really technical, specialists, but they really don't know a lot about sales. How are you going to help them, drive more sales? And I don't know if I agree with it, but I'd like to hear, the opinion from the panel. Justin, would you mind opening up with this one?
Yeah, sure. So I don't know if I totally agree, because I do know we have several partners out in the field who have some tremendous salespeople. I think that it could probably be, and I'll ask you guys for your opinion, but I think that it probably goes from one partner to the next. I definitely see, especially in small business where we have kind of the legacy, is just just partners who are one-man shops who they're a technical person and they get most of their leads from referrals. I definitely see that a lot. I mean, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I'll start, and I'll say that, and I'll echo what you were saying, Justin. I think there are some great people in the channel that are very sharp, and they really know that the technologies. They know how to connect with the buyers and the businesses that they're selling to. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, you do have some people that are, I think, focused a little bit more on sort of the features and stuff. And then when it gets down to sort of the features and sort of the names of the products, I can think it gets a little bit hard for the buyer sometimes to kind of connect there. But if you're focusing on the capabilities, I think a lot of great people in the channel that do that already.
Yeah. And I think it all depends on what you're selling too. So if you have a technical product, you probably need to be more technical, right? Azure is a little bit more of a technical product than Office 365. And so having that level of technical acumen, I do see partners that have the ability to translate some of the technical information into business speak does help, but also being able to establish credibility with technical individuals within their customers. Having that information, being able to answer some surface level questions, very helpful for a lot of customers.
And Sherman, let me just point out to everybody, we are monitoring the Q&A, so we've got a couple questions that have already come in, but make sure to ask some questions if you guys want to participate in the call with us.
Awesome. Well, why don't you go ahead and ask one of those?
Okay. Well, first, there was someone who mentioned Eric Kine, I think it's Kine. A long time ago, you suggested a program to run a survey while doing a presentation. Can you talk to us about what that program was?
Yeah, well, that program was basically the online Excel survey, and that was great because what it enabled you to do is actually give the link out while you're actually, during the presentation, and to say, hey, look, please, everyone fill it out, and at the end, we'll go ahead and raffle software. But let me ask you a follow-up question to the technical to sales ratio here. The follow-up question I have is, do you think that the partners in our channel are spending enough time on developing their sales portion of their practice? Now, that might be a better question.
I think that's a great question. And I kind of think, and even as you were speaking earlier, one of the books I read a long time ago said sales can be the hardest paying, high paying job, or the easiest low paying job.
Right.
And so I think it's all about preparation. It's all about what you put into it. And I think some of the things you guys were saying earlier, like our industry is really moving away from like a technical sale and moving into more of the business process. And so having those conversations that don't talk about the tech, but talk about here are the capabilities that you're going to get. I think that's where I see more people are having successes. I'm just talking to you about, hey, let's create a workflow that's just going to get your job done 3 times faster. Who cares about the technology, whether it's SharePoint or whatever else in the back end?
And what you find is with a lot of SMBs, they may, most of the individuals that are making the decisions are business leaders, right? So they don't understand tech. And when you start leading with technical features and functions and what the product is, it can overwhelm them. And to the point that customers may not even want to take your calls because they know that they're going to look awkward. So I think it's really important to be able to understand your audience and who you're talking to. There might be a technical influencer within the organization, and to be able to shift gears when necessary to talk to that person. But ultimately, the person that's going to be writing the checks is going to ask, how are these specific products or feature sets going to assist me in growing my business, reducing costs, improving my bottom line? So being able to really understand what specifically within your customer that is a trigger for you to have that conversation go deeper is really important.
Yeah, we're starting to get a lot of questions here, so maybe let's throw some out to you, Ro. All right, so it's a fine line between sales and tech, and the key is to avoid getting bogged down in the details and not giving away free consulting. I'm sure you guys have been through that before.
Man, all the time. Yeah, so this is something that we always have a challenge with, because if we're in the technology every single day, and we know the ins and outs and the knobs and the dials that we're turning to get a technology work a certain way. And when customers start asking about certain capabilities or certain business things they want, it's really easy to get into the weeds, we call it. And we're always trying to avoid that, because you can literally go off the rails in your conversation. And if you are trying to sell at the end of the day, you remember there's a whole bunch of things you should be doing in a sales call. You should be establishing kind of what their budget is, what the authority is, and maybe what their needs are and the timing. And a lot of the times when it gets into the technical portion, you spend your entire meeting just going through the needs, and you don't ever get any of those other questions answered. And so you got to be very careful with that in terms of you were saying about the technology and giving away the free consulting. We never mind doing that for customers, but it actually doesn't get them closer to a decision. And that's what we're looking for at the end of the day. And those other factors I talked about really move the sales process along a little bit faster than the actual needs part.
And so, like, if you were working with a customer, do you normally charge for proof of concepts? And then if you do you credit that back if they purchase, or how do you guys?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of different ways to attack that. If it's a small proof of concept, sometimes we'll just do it on spec. We just know that, hey, we can show the customer something and do it. But sometimes the proof of concepts are a little bit more sizable. And a lot of the times now, with a lot of these cloud technologies, the difference between going from a proof of concept to production is literally calling it production. right? So if you're doing a proof of concept, and for example, we focused on SharePoint Online, you know, and you build the system in SharePoint Online, and by the time it becomes operational or production, it's really just calling it production at that point because all the architecture, the infrastructure is already in place. And so in a case like that, we might be a little bit more cautious about how much work we put in up front.
Okay. There's a couple of CRM partners here online. So maybe Eugene, maybe we can talk about what's the best way for targeting CRM partners for business. So like a business-to-business sales. I think they followed up with a question like most of their businesses through the partner channel. So how could somebody specifically target a CRM partner?
Well, I think one of the key things that we talk about within SMB is joining IAMCP, right? So understanding who the other partners are within your geography, I think, is really critical. Establishing those relationships, building that trust, and there's a ton of partners in any other geography within the US. Secondly, I would leverage your partner sales executive or your partner channel development manager, because they are the glue. They're the person that will know hundreds of partners within the territory. So they can make some recommendations. They probably have some references as well. And also, if you have any other types of networking group, whether that's HTG or with one of the distributors, they can probably make some referrals to you as well. And I think what's critical is to understand what your strengths are and where you need assistance, and being able to actively and proactively communicate that to other partners and understand, so for them to understand where they can specifically fit into your business, because sometimes we describe our businesses very generically, and a lot of other partners may not see where that fit is. So I think if you can describe that need and be very point specific, other partners can potentially help out.
And Sherman, I think maybe we throw this one back over to you, because Eugene's right on about talking about going to IMCP and building that out, but then it gets into like talking about influencers, which is right down your alley. So maybe you can talk to us a little bit about how partners can leverage influencers to sell.
Well, yeah, I mean, it really comes down to vertical markets, and you have to think about, things and how you approach, your sales. Do you really want to have the shotgun approach to everything? And I keep, professing this, when we're attending all of the SMB lives, that, you want to focus. You want to focus instead of just being everything to everyone. And I think utilizing MCC and the program that we have behind it with Project Lead Gen, you'll understand that, hey, I want to go deep on one specific thing so I can be prepared. And I think that's the idea behind this. Now, Eugene just talked about, generalizations to a degree, right? Talking about the business. And I want to get, the first act really is about the elevator pitch. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I go to a lot of networking events, and I sit there and and I meet a lot of different people, and a lot of people have their hand out, right? But a lot of people completely flub what they do. Or you say, hey, so what do you do? And they'll say, well, I'm in the automotive industry, or I work for Coca-Cola. Okay, great. Or I work for so and so. Okay, well, what do you do? It's not who you work for, it's what do you do. So, what is the importance, I'll throw this over to Ro, like what do you think the importance of having a simple response to what you can do and be descriptive? How much importance do you put on that?
Oh man, that is critically important. And I'm going to touch on something that Eugene talked about a little bit earlier in terms of when Eugene was mentioning the IAMCP, and that's a key networking for partners. And people are trying to explain what each company does. And there is a lot of overlap between what companies do. So the number one advice I always give to partners and to our own salespeople is when we go out and we're in these networking events, we have to keep the message super, super simple. So our message is very simple. We do SharePoint. Now, that's our elevator pitch. It used to be a lot different. It used to have more words when people didn't even know what SharePoint was, right? And didn't even know what collaboration cloud was. So our pitch has changed over time, but the end result is it's very, very simple. We do a lot of other stuff besides just SharePoint, but that's kind of the main thing we do. And that's the simple message that we try to hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah, it reminds me of an old IMCP meeting. We have a lot of partners in this here in Southern California. I think about 150 partners who are part of the SoCal group. But there was one partner in particular, Brendan Neary, who's been a member of the IMCP for a long, long time. And whenever everybody would stand up and they'd introduce themselves, he'd stand up and say, "I'm Brendan Neary. I and we do System Center.
Yeah, and I remember that meeting.
And I remember specifically a lot of people would come up and say, I got to come up with a pitch like that because I know Brendan does so much more than System Center, but he just locks in because nobody else in this room does System Center, and now everybody knows him for that.
Yes.
So I thought that was really interesting and very insightful for a lot of the partners.
Yeah.
We've got a couple more questions, Sherman. Let's see. How can someone improve their technical and business process sales skills? What resources are available? How do you guys do it?
That's a great question. So I'm a consummate reader, and I love to read because there's a whole wealth of knowledge out there of people who already have mastered it, and so you can learn from these people. So there's a couple of one of the key books that I like. There's I always mispronounce the guy's name, so I'm just going to say the name of the book, but it was actually recommended to me by Microsoft. Partner sales executive Joshua Shea recommended this book. It's called Let's Get Real, and it's a great book in terms of going through the sales process, in terms of how you qualify and how you don't qualify, and where you spend your sales time. And what's interesting is a lot of people spend a lot of time working really hard on things that will never close, right? Yeah. And so the question is, it's more important to decide what you're not going to do than actually what you're going to do. And that book is really interesting because it's all about, let's strip away all the stuff and let's get real about getting to a decision. So like I was talking about earlier, people could spend a lot of time talking about needs, but it may not get anyone closer to making a decision because those other factors come into play.
Yeah, I do something similar, and so I've always looked at my car as like a university on wheels. And so there's like my favorite speaker, philosopher, sales trainer is Jim Rohn, and he has a series called The Art of Exceptional Living. And I think I've listened to it at minimum 100 times. Yeah. And it's like eight or 10 CDs. And so what I would do is I'd listen to the first CD. Actually, I'd listen to it all the way through, all 8 CDs. And then I'd listen to the first one 10 times in a row. Then I'd listen to the second one 10 times in a row. And then I would go through and I do it the whole thing 2 or 3 times in a row. And I mean, I used to in my early days spend a ton of time in the car. I don't as much anymore, but I do a little bit. But I would always have something. I never really listened to the radio because I wanted to get my mind right and I wanted to learn. And especially going into a sales meeting, that always helped prep me and give me some great ideas. And it was amazing how you just feed your mind a couple little things and all of a sudden you've got some great things coming out.
So Eugene, what do you think? I mean, you have experience, in EPG and I mean some high level sales. So what would you say?
Yeah, so number one, I would encourage companies to invest in sales training. So sales training, creating a methodology, having standardized practices, understanding the sales language that's consistent across the entire organization. So when somebody calls a sales stage of 20%, it means the same thing to every person within the organization. At 60%, it means a proposal has been submitted, and we know what the best next action is. So that's so critical, is having a common framework so that you can create consistency within an organization. Now you might say, well, what if I'm only 10 employees and only 2 salespeople? I think it's still critical to have some type of skeletal outline for a sales methodology. And there's different books out there, there's trainings out there. I would encourage everyone to go through something similar so that everyone's on the same page. And having come from the enterprise, we hired people from Oracle and from other enterprise-wide companies. Everyone came in with their own sales styles, which is great. We want to embrace that. But we can't interpret 20% sales stage for one person and have that different for another person, right? So having a sales process, consistent sales tools and methodologies, pipeline, I think is really key. Understanding where the technical salespeople fit into that methodology, where specifically in the pipeline that they invest their time is so critical to kind of moving that deal forward. So I'd highly encourage that.
So I would, those are great ideas. Now, the other thing I would look at, especially extrapolating on Justin's thought about the university on wheels, I use audible.com, and there's 2 great books that I'm actually listening to right now. One is called The Like Switch, how to get people to like you. It's really great, actually. It's by an FBI profiler. And then another one called Humble Consulting. And it's really a different way of approaching sales tactics. So those are pretty good. So, actually, I put this other question here, and we'll move this along to Act 2 here. But I want to get this back to Ro, because we were just talking earlier, and he had a great thought. And then, Justin and Eugene, you can weigh in on this. In order for sales to be successful, what else needs to be in sync? So we have to look at the whole thing.
Yeah, that is a great question, because I think there was a period of time in our company when the markets were changing and customers were starting to buy our services differently. Like, we used to sell it in a certain way, and now they're buying it differently. So more bite-sized engagements. And what wasn't in sync with us at the time was our service delivery was not used to delivering on that. And there was a lot of anxiety created in the organization. Well, we're used to selling things, I'm going to make up a number. We're used to selling $40,000 projects and up. And all of a sudden, customer wants to buy at $5,000 increments. How do we even fulfill that? Right now, we have the technical capability to do so. Our mind wasn't wrapped around yet how to kind of carve that up into bite-sized executable pieces and to do that profitably. And we were a little bit out of alignment there for a while until we got into alignment, which we're in great alignment now. But it did provide some, some interesting times and some anxiety in the organization.
Hey, so guys, we have a question from our friend Eric Klaus,
Okay.
who we were talking about IMCP. Eric's president of IMCP here. So Eric's saying historically IT was about selling products, whether it was a server or a packaged software solution. They said it sounds like you guys are talking a lot about selling something that's an intangible, like selling a vision of a solution.
Yeah, and I've talked about that at SMB Lives, if you've heard me present. And I think you'll see us moving up the ladder in terms of value-added solutions. So one example of that is a secure productive enterprise. We're packaging up 3 different types of products: Windows 10 Enterprise, Office 365, E5, and Enterprise Mobility plus Security, right? To talk about individually each feature within each of those products is an infinitely long conversation. And you don't have time to do that. Customers don't have time to listen to that. And to be able to articulate something much higher, much broader, to paint the vision for the customer where they could possibly go. I give the analogy of looking at model homes or looking at brand new cars. They never put the bottom of the line model out there for you to view. You don't see a house with no upgrades, with no window treatments and linoleum tile, right? Nobody does that. And there's a reason for that, because we want to see what the vision of what is possible. And we want to do that with our products as well, is to communicate the ability for SMBs to have enterprise-grade security, enterprise-grade collaboration, democratizing solutions around collaboration and mobility. Huge, right? So if a customer that's only 10, 15, 20 employees that says, "What, I can have all this? This is amazing." And there may be different reasons why they don't consume all of that at one time, but they know what bite-sized pieces that they can take off and then determine what their path is 1 year, 2 years, 3 years down the line, right? That's so critical, is to be able to paint that vision in terms of directionally where you want to take the customer.
But I think another thing to think about, though, and I see this a lot, is just salespeople who have sticker shock, because they think, oh, well, that's a secure productive enterprise E5 SKU, that's $57. My customer's not going to pay $57. And I think it's on us as salespeople to be able to portray the value. Yeah. And because if you're just talking technology, you're not, $57 is a lot of money. But if you're portraying, hey, there's actually $150 worth of value in this secure productive enterprise SKU, then it makes all the sense in the world.
Right. Yeah. And you hit on a really interesting point, and both you guys, in terms of understanding the capabilities, but not getting into the details and the product names and stuff, but also in terms of that sticker shock, because sometimes customers are asking for a capability or solution, and you can scope something out very quickly. And there's a true example. The price happened to be $16,000 of something that was being pitched, and they said, "Oh my God, that's way more money than we would ever spend on a solution like this." And my favorite question always is, "Well, how do you do it today?" And their answer was, "Well, we have 3 full-time employees that do this." I go, "Okay, so I'm sure we can find $16,000 amongst those 3-time full employees in terms of having them do other things." So yeah, it's about talking about the business value.
Yeah, totally.
So moving on to the Act 2 here, we want to kind of bring up, preparation is our key today, right? It's talking about this. So this is good stuff that we're coming out. So here's another opinion that I've heard a lot, and I've heard it from on the technical side, as well as CEOs and friends of mine. Is this really most sales executives are generally unprepared for meetings and or objections. I'll throw it over to the panel. Eugene, what is your thought in regards to something like that?
I mean, I've seen this a lot, and it's not because people don't have great intentions. I think part of the issue is you run out of time, and then a meeting creeps up on you, and you might have 1 or 2 additional people within your organization that needs to be prepped for this call. And then it just it magnifies the problem, right? Because you're not prepared, nobody else within the organization is prepared. And I use a typical just rule of thumb. I mean, if it's a 1-hour meeting, at minimum, you need to be investing an hour of prep time, if not 4x the amount. And I think it's critical to understand what type of meeting. If it is just an iterative meeting, it's a check-in, probably just circling back on the agenda, making sure people understand what the role is within this meeting and what the purpose and the outcome is. That's really critical. Is you don't want to meet to meet. You want to have an objective, make that really clear for the customer, have an outcome, and then what next steps are. And every meeting should serve a purpose within that sales pipeline and that sales stage. Ultimately, you want to go from a prospect or lead to an inquiry or somebody that just has some interest and move them all the way to close, right? So every step should be intentional in terms of what you're doing. Mastering the preparation is so critical. We would work with our sellers to understand how much time that they prepped, and it became pretty clear pretty quickly who prepped and who prepped a little bit. And there's so many different things that you can do. I think what's really important, if it's a new customer, really understanding their industry, understanding the customer background. Now, SMBs might be a little bit harder because you don't have a lot of publicly available information, but there's still a lot of information that's out there. Secondly, you can look at LinkedIn. I think that's great. As our push towards social selling is so critical, and finding other social avenues of information that's available. And then lastly, look at job openings to see where that business is going. If you see tons of jobs that are out there, they might be technical related, they might be sales oriented. It gives you a direction of salespeople means they've got revenue to go fulfill. If it's technical, they're still building up their technical infrastructure, right? So it gives you a little bit of a taste of the direction of that company. Any information is better than going in flat-footed because when you go into those customer meetings, ideally, you don't want to just have information to have and to share. You want to come in with a point of view. So you have something to deliver for a specific industry for that specific customer, and it becomes very clear if you've done your research. Now, if I met with the CEO, I would want to try to get an informal conversation with people that report up to the CEO, like VPs of finance, sales, operations, HR. So I get a flavor of what the CEO is looking for. Not everything culminates to one big meeting, and it's either make or break. It becomes an iterative process where I collected a lot of information and feedback, so that meeting hits the target, and it's exactly what my customer is looking for.
There are a lot of good nuggets in there. I think another thing for me is I always like to work backwards. So I always start with what is my primary objective for a meeting. And then once I figure out what that primary objective is, sometimes, most of the time, I also have a secondary objective. And just in case I can't achieve that one because I put it out there, I'm going to close this deal. My secondary objective is I'm going to get a second meeting. But when I have that primary objective, then I can work backwards on what is the preparation I need to get there. Yeah. And then everything for me, for me to succeed, just means that I got my primary objective. That's simply put.
Yeah. So mine's just a summary of what they said, because that's actually really good.
Yeah.
But the last thing I would just say is you did one sentence in there. You said about make sure everyone knows what the roles are. So if you are going with multiple people, it takes only 2 minutes before the meeting. Say, agreed. Technical questions you handle. If you new product, you do this, and if you get that defined, the meeting will run a lot more smoothly from the client perspective.
So what would you say are 3 things to consider when prepping for meetings? This way we can give some people some stuff to go back with. What would you, Justin, what would you say?
Well, first thing I just said, I have to set my primary and potentially secondary objectives. I want to know who I'm meeting with. I want to do some of those background checks like Eugene was talking about. I want to understand the time that I have so I can put the effort into, okay, it's easy to come up with an hour's worth of content. It's hard to come up with 5 minutes of content. So, and that's one of the things that I personally struggle with at Microsoft, because we've got so many amazing products, and I want to convey that out to all of my partners, but I don't want to overwhelm them. So it's easy for me just to send an email that would take you a day to read, but nobody's going to read that. So how do I make that succinct? And one thing that I've done that really proved this to me was, a lot of times I'll challenge myself and I'll reach out to people that I feel like are unreachable. So like I was reaching out to Mark Cuban, and what I learned with going back and forth on email with Mark Cuban was, if I sent him anything that was like 3 or 4 paragraphs, I would never get a response. But if I sent him one sentence that was like a yes or no answer, I could get a response. And then once we got a couple of yes, no answers out of the way, then we could go a little bit deeper. But it was always, you've got to make things succinct so you can get to that next step.
Eugene, what would you say?
I mean, I agree with everything that was stated. Simply have an agenda, right? Have an agenda. Understand how you're going to work through that meeting. You know, executives are busy, everybody's busy, and we need to get to the point. We need to be succinct. We got to simplify the message, translate it back to business speak, ideally translate it back to the customer's language, right? So if they're talking about manufacturing, supply chain, plant floor, I mean, that's how you need to speak and communicate, There's no point in them trying to learn the Microsoft language. Let me tell you about, okay, you don't know anything about Azure. Let me tell you what machine learning is. No one really cares. No one really cares. How does that impact their business? That's really critical. Then somebody doing the technical due diligence will go figure out why machine learning is so critical and make sure that it works. But that's after you go through that discovery phase. That's after you get validation from the CEO and the business decision maker that they want to move forward, right? And that you'll cross that path, but not at the beginning.
Yeah.
So, next question really have it, and I'll direct this over to Rob, so you can start with this one. Have you ever been in any situations where, you're in a sales call and you felt unprepared?
Oh, yeah, all the time, like right now. This meeting, just these questions right there are coming up. But all the time. And I think if you have good product knowledge and you basically, go to the meeting with the true intention of actually listening to kind of what their issues are, and then knowing how to basically steer the conversation so you get to that aspect of the meeting where you can kind of move it forward. But I get thrown into situations all the time with very, very little preparation. We're talking to the company, and then you can be very honest with the person that you're speaking with. So like, hey, this is relatively new, but hey, can I ask a couple of you heard basic questions, grounding questions, background questions, and a couple of questions I love to focus on because this puts me right on target is I like to understand, what the person is trying to achieve in terms of the amount of people it's going to impact, because that gives me a sense of scale right away, what the size of the solution could be, because we have solutions that range from $1,000 to $1 million, right? It's consulting. It can be a lot of stuff. So if you could waste a lot of time going down a path thinking that you're pitching a $200,000 project when at the end of the day, it's only going to serve 2 people to do something that's very small. So you want to always have your solution commensurate to the size of the problem.
I'll do a follow-up question to that one. Okay, so to feeling unprepared. Has anyone on the panel actually went to Facebook, went to LinkedIn, to search the person they're meeting with as well as their direct reports to be prepared for the meeting?
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely.
I think that's almost a basic now.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's so important because, one of the things that we talk about is your first impressions and making friends and trying to find some common ground. There's really no better way than to do that. Going in cold is really not going to help you out.
Hey, Sherman, we do have a couple of really good questions that popped up. Do we have a couple minutes?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So there was a question from Patrick Berkey asking, what is your strategy to compare to Google or other competing systems?
In what way?
Well, I think we were just talking about preparing. So like if you're preparing because you're going against a Google compete,
Right.
I'm assuming, Patrick, and correct me if I'm wrong,
Right.
but let's say you're going into a meeting that they have the G Suite.
Yeah.
So what are some of the
Absolutely.
things you prepare for that?
Yeah, so I think it's important as much as you can, grab a compete battle card, right? So that's something that we're working on internally. We got some feedback from a partner that some of our compete information behind the MPN sign-on was not current. So we're actually in the process of trying to get that compete information updated not only for Google, but for all our major competitors. So I think having a general sense of what some of the key points are, what are the things that are going to be a battleground for you when it comes to competing against a formidable competitor. But I think it's even more important to make sure that whatever you're presenting is fitting the business need. That's really critical because there's going to be a point in time where some competitors, we're either going to be equivalent to them or they're going to be equivalent to us. Maybe it's not today, but at that point, it's not the job of the product to sell itself. What's important is how you position it, meeting the business needs, and demonstrating value. To me, those are critical things. And if you can do that better than your competitor from a sales perspective, you have an upper leg in terms of winning that deal.
And then there was another question from Greg about tell us about some research or how you would research SMBs. What are some of the social networks available? What's worked well? But Ro, you have anything on this one? I can add a couple things too.
There's a lot of great resources, and I will tell you one of my. I don't want to call it a secret weapon because I tell everybody. Your public library is amazing. So your public library has access to a lot of different databases that would be too expensive for you to get access on your own. So there's one called Reference USA, and almost every single library will give you digital access to Reference USA, and it has a lot of great background information on companies. So you can actually type in, Paul's Auto Shop down the corner if you're checking that out, and it'll give you the owner's name and anything that's been filed with D&B Dun & Bradstreet, and a lot of other information that they glean, the names of some of the officers in terms of how their budget is spread out and stuff. So that's a great resource.
Yeah, a good one for me is the LinkedIn Sales Navigator. I mean, they're part of the Microsoft team. We don't know the LinkedIn team just yet, but we've been using that internally for about the last year or so. And what I love about it is it's you can go research somebody. You have the end mail to be able to send things back and forth. But where it really gets interesting is, let's say I don't know Ro, but Ro is a prospect for me. I can tag Ro as a prospect, and then every time Ro writes an article on LinkedIn, it notifies me, and so then I can just start making comments. Hey Ro, that's a fantastic article. You're a thought leader in the industry. And then I can come back, and then if I reach out to you, no longer is it a real cold call.
Yep.
Now it's more of like a warm cold call.
Right, exactly.
So, the next thing is really about, the third act, really, in that's an opening statement. So one of the things that we hear about a lot is, the best partners are just simply lucky. They just fall into deals. They, once again, come in at 10 o'clock, right? And they leave at 2. They're playing golf. But I like to throw it to the panel, in prepping for meetings and doing all the right things. Do you agree with the statement that the best partners are just lucky?
I wish I got a little bit more luck, but I would say absolutely not. I'd say preparation is everything. But you might get lucky to get the opportunity, and I think everyone has their fair share of good luck and bad luck. But preparation is really what will define is if you can take advantage of that or not. But I think it boils down to hard work and preparation, consistency.
An old mentor of mine said, "Luck favors the prepared mind."
Yeah.
So, I remember my first job was selling Kirby vacuums door to door, and there was a guy, his name was JJ, and he always he dressed awesome every day. It'd be like all purple shoes, purple socks, and he would sell a vacuum cleaner every day. And I was like, man, he'd walk up to somebody, knock on their door, and they'd say, "Oh, we've been waiting for the Kirby guy to come by. Can we just buy one?" It's like, how are you so lucky? But the thing was that he was so prepared. And now that I'm much more experienced, I know all the things that he put into it to be able to be that lucky.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. No, I agree. It's a huge amount of preparation, bunch of perspiration, right, to get the inspiration. So I think it's really critical. You don't have to be the smartest salesperson, but you have to be a hard worker, I think, in my opinion. And person that gets it done is going to win favor with the customer.
I'll tell you, it's interesting about that. A good friend of mine said, you're not lucky. You create your own luck by preparation. And I remember, when I was carrying my first telecom job, I had just come out of working for Prudential Securities, right? I was a stockbroker, and there you had to make 100 calls every single day. And I remember going into Allegiance Telecom at the time. They're now defunct, so you can't look them up. But I remember walking in and watching the other people, sitting there all complaining about why they're not lucky or why they're not getting deals. And I basically took the same exact approach. I'm going to do 100 calls a day. I'm going to set 2 appointments a day. And within 1 month, I was beating everybody in sales. But I overheard in the background, oh, Sherman, he's so lucky. He's going here and there. And no, what the reality was, I was just working harder. And I was learning my craft. I was blowing a lot of deals because I didn't know what I was doing, but I was learning them and it got better and better. So that's really, really important. So let's get into the opening statement here. I know we're running a little over because we started a little late, so just in case you're wondering. Opening statements are so important, and we're not talking about the elevator pitch because that's really important, but your opening statement when you're coming into a meeting and how you're getting started is really important. So, Justin, I'd probably throw this over to you really is, why is it so important to have a good opening statement?
Well, I think everyone, like when we talk about preparation, I think that everyone needs to at least have the opening part of what they're going to talk about prepared, and it can be very simple. So whenever I create an opening statement, at first it's an introduction. That's my first line. So hi, my name's Justin, calling from Microsoft. Second thing is I need to build some type of value. So the reason I'm calling is we've got an amazing new opportunity around the Cloud PBX. Today, we launched 25 new features for the Cloud PBX, including auto attendant and call queues and so forth. Now, we have a beta program going on right now where we're trying to get a few partners in. I'm creating urgency. That's the third part. So we've got a beta program. If you want to get in, I can take a couple of partners into a beta program that we really want to go really deep with to build that cloud business, that Cloud PBX business. Is this something you might be interested in? So I'll start with that, and then I know that I'm going to go into some Q&A. And typically, what I found is that with objections, there's usually 5 or 6, and that's it. So if you find out what those 5 or 6 objections are, and you have those questions mastered, you can be set up to have any conversation with anybody around that one topic.
I'd like to add something that Justin just did, and I think it's really important for the opening statement was you almost finished it off. Well, you did finish it off with a question. Right? Is this something you'd be interested in? Because the opening statement, and when you're talking with a customer, it should not just be a one-way broadcast. It should be to get interaction with the customer. So that's a great way to end the opening statement.
Good points.
So with that, let me ask you, Ro, I'll throw this over to you, and then maybe Eugene would have a great, probably great answers to this. Is how do you manage? Well, let me start it off. A lot of times, salespeople that you're managing may shun or may be like, I don't want to learn that. I already know what I'm talking about. No, I'm good. However, they clearly need some help. So how do you manage your teams or partners on learning, new sales techniques, or, what do you do in your business?
Yeah. Well, I think my answer is going to be a little bit different than Justin and Eugene's answers, because salespeople that work for us, I pay them, right? So if they don't actually do exactly kind of what we need them to do, there's a little bit more of a firmer consequence to that. But everyone's got a different style and everyone's unique. And so it's almost kind of like they have to kind of pass kind of audit at the end. And that audit could be a checklist. And for us, it was basically know these specific concepts about our products, know how we sell this product, know how we sell this product. Now, everyone's going to have their own style in terms of how they do that. But if you're sending them out the gate, in terms of like going through basic training, sending them out the gate with a set of skills that that they have, and it's a good base level of skills, and now it's all art after that, then I think that's a good way to do that.
I think encouraging and creating a culture of practicing, right? So practicing, we have something internally called Pitch Perfect. So the Pitch Perfect is on specific products, right? It could be on around Azure or Secure Productive Enterprise. And it's a safe environment, or it should be a safe environment internally. You can make mistakes inside the walls of your company. So being able to dialogue, other people being able to communicate, some of the zingers that customers might bring up, surface up issues or questions that you can address and think about. You have some time to think about. So I think that's critical, is practicing and having a culture where that is part of your business. I think it's a shame, but I see people attend sales training, they take it, they say, oh, great value, and then they go back to their old ways. And that's really hard. I think that's super difficult to create something of a big change within an organization, because the only way you're going to do that is if you are instituting those changes over and over, and it takes multiple times to create that change, because we're going to default on what we're comfortable with and what we've always done. So if we want to make some type of change within our organization, you got to drill, you got to practice, you got to pitch, you got to be able to communicate this internally to your internal audience.
Yeah.
Great. All right. Well, hey, I want to say thank you to everybody for joining us today. We have a couple things to just really kind of go over, and it's really the call to action from today. We've learned a lot of great things from the panel. And the first thing that I want to go to is, please, once again, go to aka.ms/PLG and register to be a Microsoft partner there. Next is we're going to actually put some great resources on that page. That's the new board. That's where you go. If you're part of the Project Lead Gen or Microsoft Community Connections Initiative, you're on this call, super important. Make sure aka.ms/PLG. We will have some resources. I will be posting some things up there about prepping for a call, elevator pitch, opening statements to kind of help you guide along that. Now, next is take the PLG training. So on that same board, there's a big link that says, access to it. That'll take you to the Microsoft website where we actually have the Project Lead Gen training modules. Super important to understand those, because when you want to increase your sales substantially by selling to many instead of selling to one, you need to know how to do it. And it's a great program. Make sure you take a look at that. Next, we will have check out the board every week, because we'll make sure that we post who's on next. And then we have an online link in there that says submit your questions. So if you have thoughts or questions you want us to approach, please utilize that avenue to do so. So, really in summary, I think what we need to do is, understanding the importance of sales to your business means you need to be prepared. That's number one, right? And number two is scripting your words. Practice, practice, practice. Remember, the luck part of it, while we love to say that we're all lucky, it really comes down to the best salespeople, the best sales executives, the best owners, CEOs are the ones that practice over and over again. And that's one thing that I love about, really working for Eugene and Microsoft, is we have a safe environment and we practice. Practice within. It's not just you went through sales training, so you no longer have to do the practice of I'm the customer, you're the prospect. Challenge your team, be a little uncomfortable, but it's good though, because then when you have this conversation, they're just ready to talk to you about it. And then lastly, preparation is key to success. I want to give all the panelists, first of all, I want to say thank you so very much for coming today. But I want to give you a chance to just provide your last thoughts on sales and to the partners. And we'll start with Eugene.
Yeah, I would say what's important is to be genuine, right? So I want to kind of temper some of the things around scripting. So you don't want to have an answer so overly prepared for every question that a customer has for you. So if there's a question you really don't know the answer to, I think it's okay to say, I don't know the answer to that, but I'll get back to you. So being genuine and sincere, I think, is really critical to building trust with customers, and don't remove the human element in the sales process.
It's kind of like the call today. I mean, we're doing this live, and you never know what's gonna happen or what's gonna. Yeah. We were a few minutes late. We had a couple of technical snags, but I think, like Eugene says, when you do that, it becomes more genuine. And when you become more genuine, then people know that you care. So it's, if you're prepared and you know the answers to certain things, but you don't know, that's okay. Yeah. So just be real. I think that's the most important thing, is to be real and bring in the right people when you need to bring them in.
Yeah, and the last thing I would close is patience. I mean, sales cycles, they take a long time to build that trust. And so what I always like to say is gentle, but constant pressure. And you don't have to close on your first phone call. It might take a while, but as long as you're consistent and the pressure is very gentle, it'll work out. Yeah.
That's pretty. That is awesome. The last one, gentle pressure. I tell you that I'd be in a lot of meetings and they wouldn't close when they needed to, but I'd always check in. I'd be like, hey, my ship is about 100 yards from port. Do you think we can get some wind to blow it to get us in there? But I would just always softly, but pressure. They're going to get another email from me that next week. But anyways, so from Microsoft and the West Region team, thank you so much for joining us today. Please check up next week. We're going to have Vince Bradley from WTG CEO, as well as a surprise guest from Ingram Micro, Director of CSP Worldwide, will be on here, and then one of my dear friends. So please join us next week. Thank you so much, and have a great day. Bye-bye.